Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this event in which we look forward to celebrating and reflecting on CTERM at WPI. For me, the coronavirus this era has brought out all of the great attributes that are truly characteristic of our WPI community. And the words that I find to describe this are resilience, robustness, commitment to our students, concern for others and their well-being, and the ability to adapt to a world that is evolving around us. These attributes have been shown by our faculty, staff, administration, our president, and our board as we navigate our way through this era of the coronavirus. However, today, I really look forward to celebrating and reflecting on our amazing staff and our faculty and ways in which we have turned challenges into opportunities in all our schools. So it's really a pleasure to really be part of this event and present different perspectives that range from individual or group activities by our faculty and staff that show in many different ways just how we've innovated and how we've tried to make the most of this era. And to also hear from Dean Terry Camasano about what we've been doing in our graduate school, as well as Tanya Domingo about how our faculty governance has really been critical to ensuring that we, the WPI community, can continue to serve our students in all the amazing ways that we've found to do so. And so I hope that all of you that have taken the time to tune in today will really enjoy all the things that we have to celebrate and gain a perspective of our faculty, of our staff, of our community in ways that will be positive for you. And so with that, I'd like to just state that we're going to start with two recordings by our first two faculty. The first of these is by Sarah Wooden-Schwartz and Kimberly Le Chasseur, who will talk about the work they've been doing together in a video. And then this will be followed by a second video in which Kansabunku, John Sullivan, Valerie will talk about the work that they've been doing in ways that enable us to do experimentation anywhere, anytime, so that our students can continue to learn. So Rachel, if I can, could you please start off with these two videos?
Just in case we happen to get something miraculous would be a really good Uber title for all of our work together.
But for real, I think I
have
not actually shown you before the video of Hold, or I guess it was Hands on Wednesday back then, so it used to be on Wednesdays. I don't think I've ever actually shown you the video of what that is. So
that's true.
This is a video from 2019 when we were still in person of these hands-on experiences for the statics class that obviously we've worked together on quite a bit. But the video I'm going to show you is from the first week. It's one of the exercises where they need to learn about position vectors. And so they have these big cubes and they mark locations on the cubes so that they can measure the locations of points in space and then measure the magnitudes of position vectors. So there they are working on the exercise. Don't be deceived by their phones. The questions are on their phones. And so I wanted to recreate that in the remote environment, but I didn't have the ability for them to obviously get together in person and do this. So I redid the activities so that they were working on things at home. So students had to find their own structure instead of having these PVC cubes. And so you can see here some students using whatever it was that they found, a drawer or a chair. And they did other activities as well. Another one where they were looking at having forces in that were non-symmetric. And so they used cardboard boxes and had rubber bands or hair ties in order to see how different different strings would stretch differently. Here you can see them all in Zoom together, holding up their individual setups.
It's great to see how from home they're able to recreate enough of the conditions that they need in order to physically understand what they are learning in theory, which is the whole point of these hands-on learning days. But they also look pretty different.
Yeah, that was one of the challenges of translating it, redesigning using things that they would commonly have. So I wanted to make sure that if they were going to be supplying their own equipment, that it was going to be based on things that most students would have a cardboard box. As you can see, there are all different types of cardboard boxes there. Some were some food packaging, some were more like Amazon cardboard boxes. But making sure that like each activity was designed based on common items. But I think a really exciting part of this work was using the salves to assess the learning gains of Hold in a remote classroom during the pandemic, which has been great. And it's the type of thing that I wouldn't have really used and certainly would not have known how to use well until we started working together.
Yeah, let's talk just a little bit about that, because I think this is a tool, it's a survey that helps me to balance wanting to get information and document systematically student experiences, but at the same time not wanting to presume that this kind of research activity is going to be worth a lot of time, because these 7-week terms and you're already adding in something innovative and new potentially. And so the student assessment of their learning gains is a nationally validated tool. It also gets at a number of things that allow us to do what we did with you, which is customize to your learning objectives. What is it that you want these hands-on learning days to help students to do? So being able to talk about things from the course that are beyond the hands-on learning days, like learning how to do free body diagrams and use them. Teaching me how to use free body diagrams, probably the best thing that came out of this project. And then being able to ask students which parts of the course, which things that you did in this course actually helped you with your learning.
I will say, I think one of the things I found to be the most interesting, probably the largest effect that we noticed from this year's collection of data was comparing it to the non-pandemic year, when we can see these compensatory effects.
Yeah, looking at compensatory effects was really exciting because you had data before the pandemic. And what we were able to find is that for students who did not get a lot of help out of lecture, either from Zoom fatigue or just didn't have the bandwidth to really make lecture useful for themselves, they were able to gain just as much learning as the 2019 students, because the Hold activities had such an impact on their learning. It had more of an impact during the pandemic than it did before the pandemic. If these are the sorts of things that you're interested in your class, come and talk to me. I'd love to talk about how I find the compensatory effects, what it means to model the data, and what you're interested in.
So in addition to working on this statics project together, we've also been working on some other projects. Moving forward, we've been working on writing some grants, which has been great. Currently, we just submitted a grant for developing an app to help students draw free body diagrams. And so hopefully some funding will come through for that and we can keep working on more projects. I have no idea how we're supposed to end this.
What course are we going to talk about today?
I'm going to talk about an engineering experimentation course. It is ME 3902, online engineering experimentation.
And what does the course ask students to do?
Well, there are a couple of things we ask students to do. Number one, they learn the measurement techniques, such as temperature measurement, stress strain measurements, and pressure measurements. And second, they also do a project in this course that culminates all the measurement techniques they learn throughout the course.
What motivated you to redesign the course?
So first of all, we would like to have our engineering experimentation class to be able to run online. And second, we were aware of the fact that not all workforce or workplaces have the high-end equipment that we have in our laboratories in mechanical engineering. So we wanted to use equipment that is available at a lower cost, and that was our second motivation.
More than that, so many of our graduates were going to work for mom and pop organizations, and they were going to work for NGOs, and they just didn't have the necessary finances to supply the state-of-art equipment that we were using in 3901. So therefore, we were not really doing the appropriate service to our students.
So Valerie, how did collaborating with John and John help with redesigning the course?
Yeah, so it was actually a really great experience. Redesign process wanted to take a learner-centered approach to course design. So rather than focusing on what they wanted to teach, we decided to really focus on the skills and competencies that students would achieve or be able to do at the end of the course. So we kind of did a backwards design approach where we started focusing on what are the student learning outcomes for the course. And then from there, that helped us develop what kind of evidence and assessment activities we would need for the course. And then from that, the next step would then be developing all of the content, the videos, lecture notes, activities, things like that, that the students would be learning in the class.
I definitely agree with Valerie. What she said really was right there. The whole idea of using this backward design methodology was really great. We actually sat there and we figured out what were the learning outcomes that we wanted these students to know. And then having this Faculty Institute for Online Teaching, it really allowed us, it gave us the guidance for how we could work from these desired learning outcomes and then structure the course sequentially so that the students could progressively become more and more accomplished in the tasks.
We worked to design the course, but then when we get to the point of evaluation, we looped in Kimberly. Kimberly, can you talk to what you thought was most important to measure in the course?
Sure. So when I first had conversations with the two of them about the course, I knew that it was important to capture the location and being able to compare where students were seemed to have a big spot in how they were thinking about the value of the course, from going from intense laboratory experience to having materials that were easily accessible no matter where the student is. So we use the student assessment of their learning gains, which is picking up steam on campus. It's a great tool because it asks students to reflect on their learning and attribute what part of their learning activities in the course were most helpful to them so that we can really start to figure out students' experiences of their learning in addition to how we grade them in a course.
So why did you choose the SALC tool as a way to measure what was going on in the course?
So I've been recommending that faculty use this tool because it's nationally validated. Close to 1 million students have used this across many different campuses, and it was created with support from the NSF, so it's also great in grants.
What were your conclusions of the survey results?
I think the most important thing that we found out was that students who completed this course entirely from home, wherever home was, they did not have any significant differences from students who were able to come in person. I thought it was fantastic to see, and I'm sure that you agree, the aspects of the course that students found most helpful for their own learning were the ones that were redesigned to be really student-centered active learning. So the final open-ended project, the lab experiments, and having the course designed in a way that was easy to navigate, which you highlighted with Valerie and the importance of that. What did you want students to be able to do as a result of the course that they weren't getting before you redesigned it?
To me, kind of the most desirable outcome was that the students had the confidence that they could do something. And building that confidence, I thought, was really great, especially with the open-ended project where they had to take at least 3 or more of the sensors and or controls and really do a project that they wanted to do.
So Caitlin and Valerie, for those who haven't worked with you before, what do you do as instructional designers?
Primarily, we serve as the learning expert. So faculty come in as subject matter experts. They know their content, but we can help work with them to figure out the best way to deliver that content in order to meet the outcomes that they're hoping students will achieve.
So another thing that we do as instructional designers is that we also sit within the IT organization here at WPI. So we have a lot of background and skills with the different tools and technologies that are available to faculty. So we can make recommendations to faculty based on their needs for the course and whatever their learning objectives are. I was able to review it with the lens of a student, thinking about how might a student approach this material, what pieces made sense, where might we need to revise or refine. What we ended up putting together was the most effective presentation of the material that would be the most useful for student learning.
Let's move on, and it's a pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Maja Bakermans. Maja?
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me, just to make sure?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. Thank you. I'm excited to celebrate and reflect on the amazing work of WPI students in creating open text. Next, please, Rachel. Awesome. First, I want to take a step back and explain that this work was inspired by a faculty learning community that I participated in, which was about using OERs, or open education resources, to promote an equitable undergraduate education. In this FLC, one reading that really stood out to me was an article that explored social justice issues behind OERs. And I think we're all very familiar with the first 2 points here, but I want to especially mention representational justice. This is where each group gets the opportunity to tell their own stories and get equal time and coverage on content. And this principle, and a really great text example from Ohio State, got me thinking about student voices. Although students are consumers of knowledge while in college, they're also producers of knowledge. And knowledge consumption and creation aren't separate, but parallel processes. So I wanted to explore new ways to promote this. Next, please. And that takes us to the draft covers of 2 texts that are being created by students across 3 courses. I'm leading this effort while collaborating with William San Martin and Jeff Pfeiffer. We also have PLAs in this courses that are mentoring teams and helping serve as co-editors as well. Next. One of the books is being written by students in the GPS course, Climate Change. I've got the table of contents on the right so you can see the type of information included. This book starts off like a traditional text with content focused on specific areas like the Earth's climate systems. Then the second half of the book transitions more to case studies, first by region, then by theme, where the last set of chapters is based on their team projects. Now this course runs for 2 terms, as you know, and so you may be thinking, I can't do this in my 1-term course. Next, please. So here's an example of another text that's actually a collaboration of 2 different courses, and they're connected by a common theme, and each course only contributed to the book in the 1 term that it ran. First, GPS students in the Extinctions course added chapters based on their research projects. And then as students in a biodiversity course wrote complementary chapters to build upon themes and examples. This text is more of a case study or lessons learned approach, while integrating key concepts, terms, and applications. Next, please. So how do students create these chapters? Well, once students receive feedback from me on their assignments, they work directly in Pressbooks, a book creation platform. Here you can see the editing page that students have access to build the content. Next, please. Here are a few screenshots of the material from an amazing chapter that was just written by students in biodiversity on horseshoe crab conservation. And this is the kind of image that will be illustrated once the book is published. Next. Just like our work in other project-based learning outcomes, here are a few points to remember when implementing OER projects in courses. I also want to mention that these open texts are a great way to highlight key interests and insights of current students in their quest to create a better world. Students are producing knowledge they find relevant, important, and necessary. Students strongly believe in the importance of OER materials, not just so they have access to materials, but to share and build knowledge with the global community. Next, please. There are more steps that need to occur before these books are ready to be published to the public, and I'm thrilled that I'll be working as a Global Lab faculty fellow. In addition, I will be participating in an AAC&U Institute on OERs. With the work of both of these, I hope that I can help WPI identify opportunities to continue to build resources for WPI faculty, staff, and students who want to build, access, or support OER materials. Next. I'm going to remain in the webinar for the Q&A session later. And I also encourage folks to reach out to me if you're interested in pursuing or supporting similar efforts. Besides the folks listed here, I also want to thank Brian Lauer and Ella Weaver from Ohio State for providing support and materials in the beginning of this process. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Batan Samase, who's going to talk about using Lightboard recordings and video feedback to motivate student learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. So as you can see here, this is I'm using Lightboard and video recording to motivate students. And let's move to the next slide. Studies have suggested that for students, seeing the instructor's face and gaze tend to affect their learning and their attention. So delivering the course remotely or through a flipped classroom means that the instructor and the student may not necessarily be physically in the same room. Yet the student will need to still know that the instructor is attending to them. To achieve this purpose, I leverage Lightboard that has been offered by WPI recently, and video lectures, to record video lectures. And I also use video feedback to provide students with formative assessments. Next. So what's the Lightboard? The Lightboard is basically designed to allow for a whiteboard feeling and provide a whiteboard style lecture, but at the same time, it allowed the lecturer's face to be seen by the audience. And as Mark Claypool said it once, it allows you to write kind of in the air, because you write it in a piece of a transparent glass. And when it's flipped, it gives you the feel like everything is written perfectly, but the student can see you while you're writing. And why use this kind of tool? Well, it offers the magical virtual presence that you don't have otherwise by just using a PowerPoint or a video, because you can interlace both the writing and your face all together. It also helps provide meaningful and engaging visuals to improve the student's understanding. Now, how can you use that? Like I was saying, there's a Lightboard studio at WPI, very well equipped with high definition and camera, and very easy to use. There is a convenient booking system, and I tried that thanks to academic technology. But if you are handy, you can also build your own. I think Professor Hellman and Claypool shared their how-tos a couple of months ago. But I was not able to build my own, so I just rely on WPI through that provided Lightboard Studio. Now, how do I use it? In particular, in C-term, I use this in a couple of ways, and I want to show next some examples. In the first example, next, please. So here, for example, I use it to provide my students with a holistic view using a mind map to show the student how all the different parts of my microeconomic course come to life and are integrated very well. And I can draw that and it comes to life as students can see it, and that tend to bring the ideas home. Next, in this next slide, I show you another use again. So let's move to the next slide. So here, instead, I use the Lightboard for a live drawing. So instead of showing the students how the graph look like at the beginning or at the end, I show them from beginning to end how the process of drawing graph and doing economic analysis can come together. And the third one that I want to show you in the next slides is how I use this for mathematical demonstration. And really, what I really like about the Lightboard is that the board become increasingly and interestingly messy, and in a very nice way. Now, I'm going to move to the next other tool that I use. Next slide. On this one is about video feedback, and that's the other tool I use to bring my face to the student, I actually tried that in C-term in a relatively smaller class to provide formative feedback to my students on their project throughout the term. And the most important here, and I highlight the word personalized here, is that it does allow you to provide short formative assessment in a very personalized way. You can say the student name, we can point to their project, and it does help enhance the assessment experience, build rapport with the student, and engage and motivate them in ways that only text will not be able to do. The video can be recorded by the instructor, or if you have TAs, you can use your TAs to record the video. You don't have to do it yourself. It's similar to writing a feedback in text and then just read it out in audio or in video, but I choose to do it in a video. And sometimes you can also record it directly by sharing your screen and showing the student what you're actually reading and how you're commenting and reacting directly to that. And to save space, WPI does recommend that we use the video.wpi.edu, which is basically WPI's YouTube, to save the content and then to share the link with the students. Next, please. Now, the video allows you to show, and I'm showing you some frame here to show you what the possibilities are. Like the video does allow us to show various, facial expression, how you react as a reader to the piece that you're reading. And at the end of the term, one student during our open feedback session said that it was really cool that I took the time to record a video just for him, and that it does help him get a better understanding on the feedback, and that he will try to incorporate that in his revision. So to finish, I want to show you just a clip, like 40 seconds worth of what the feedback might look like in the next slide, and we'll play the video for you.
Hi, Jack. Just want to take some time to give you some feedback here on your paper. I think your project is developing really well. I also like the fact that you wanted to use the classification model that you learned from another class, which is great. I'm a big fan of integrating learning across the curriculum, and this is a good example of it. Anyway, revise and resubmit as you see fit, and let me know if you have any question along the way. You might see some other minor comment on the text directly in Canvas, but I'm really proud of the direction that you go into, and the fact that you really taking the project from the beginning to the end, and let me know if you have any question along the way. You may revise and resubmit, of course.
Yeah, so that's just to show you a clip of it, and I want to end on that, and I'm happy to answer questions and provide any feedback necessary on this. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Wally Towner, who will, in practicing lean process improvements with students using Harrington as a real IE lab.
Hi, thanks, Dayton. And I enjoyed working with you on the collaborative robot project that we were not able to have the middle school kids come to campus, but Dayton and I have been working together for a year on that. So getting back to presentation, next slide. We have a lot of majors that cut across the business school classes, and one of the most significant pieces of learning is the time-wise simulation, which is colloquially known as the clock lab. And this was a federally funded study to teach manufacturing companies how to do one-piece flow. And in it, the students have to understand cycle time and tag time and various quality assurance topics and just things about processing. Next slide, please. So here, these happen to be grad students because I didn't have any photos of the undergrads, but you can see that people are elbow to elbow. There's a lot of components on the table. This was done over in Forkey for a group from GE Healthcare. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, and so we actually take this on the road, and I've run it at Biogen. I've run it at this happens to be down at Pratt and Whitney. And the undergrads run it. I basically am an absorber, and it's one of the most significant pieces of learning for the industrial engineers, the management majors. Years later, the students have said, one of the most important things I remember of my time at WPI was working in the clock lab. So we couldn't do that starting an A term, and Zoe Januszewski and I were talking about, well, how can we duplicate the experience of understanding a real production system, be able to gather data in real time, analyze it, understand what the takt time, the customer demand rate, the throughput, all that. And so next slide. So we're looking at Harrington, and the little picture on the bottom on the right shows that the waiting line was all the way over to Bartlett. back in A term. And so my A term, B term, and C term courses were, they were measuring their own experience. You say, next slide. And they would count from the time they walked in the building and going down the stairs, getting in line, looking at the queue. They were timing the people that were administering the test, observing it. They were trying to understand the number of stations they had and the throughput rates. And over a significant amount of analysis, the students came up with a lot of ways of suggestions about how to improve that process. Next slide. Okay, so spaghetti diagrams, very common in industrial engineering. All right, next slide. And so this is some data, and some of us have experienced, you know, we can get our test done in 30 seconds, and sometimes our test takes much longer than that. Next slide. One of the tools we use, value stream mapping, and so the I are actually the inventory of the students that are in the system. How is the testing controlled? You know, is it a top-down hierarchical thing, or is it a demand-driven system? And so they learned all about that. Next slide. And they would produce some relatively comprehensive analysis on developing standard work. Right, next slide. And this is a Ishikawa diagram or find cause and effect. Right, next slide. So here we are at the beginning of C term, and we've gone to the cocktail tables. We have one tester for every 3 tables, and one of the people that are running the testing service told Zoe that they were able to get 250 people an hour. So the BUS 3020 students and the lab instructors in particular offered their ideas to CERT. CERT incorporated some of them. CERT had some of their own that they did. And it was a hit for the whole school year. The course runs A, B, and C. And where can we get real industrial engineering process flow data and maybe get something actionable come out of it? And it was right there in front of us in Harrington and benefited the whole campus. And one last piece I'd mention about the IE, we were approached by the Dean of Students office. It was Greg Snoddy and his team that were trying to figure out commencement, and they asked us, how many different ways can we run commencement? And so we had 9 teams that worked on that and presented all kinds of ways, from putting the president in a golf car and driving her around versus having cars drive up around the quad and stick a hand out the window and get your diploma and have your family with you. So there was a lot of opportunity to replace that very close proximity labs experience that we normally have. Next slide. And just a couple of little things here at the end. The business school is working on having stackable courses in the grad program, and we have a lot of constituent students, like some of the BSMSs, and they like to be on campus and face-to-face because they're around, but we also have professionals in the field, corporate, and we needed some way to be able to integrate these courses and make them valuable for everybody, but also respond to market trends. Next slide. So some of the changes we made, we're going to internally focused courses, externally focused courses, data-driven. So we've got a couple of new courses coming on, and all this took place during C term under the guidance of Sharon Johnson and most of the IE faculty, and Renata Conrad's taken that over going forward. So we did a lot. Next slide. And this is just data on what we're able to do with the capstone. So I think that's my last slide. And I'll hang around and answer any questions, but it was a collaborative effort between the BUS 30 students and the CERT people and the testing company to figure out, how we can get more people through the system. And that was just a really marvelous hands-on experience that we were able to do. And that's it for me. And I'll introduce Anna Gold, and she's got some information on IQPs.
Hi, Wally. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your time today. We know that WPI prefers initials. We know IQPs. We know WPI. we are getting to know SDGs. So next slide, please. What are the SDGs? Probably most of you here know that they are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. They are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals. Next. They were set in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly. Next. And collectively, they form a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all by 2030, which seems like it's next week. It's a very ambitious program. Next slide, please. I like to think of them as not only a blueprint, but also a common framework and a common language across the globe to talk about what it is that we need to do together. Next slide, please. So who speaks SDGs? As you may know, these are beginning to pop up in lots and lots of places. Just a little bit of the variety. The Times Higher Education group has been issuing an impact ranking for universities. This is a little clip of how that looks if you Google that. Science, technology, engineering, and math publishers are beginning to use SDGs as a way of kind of seeing how research aligns with the SDGs. But funding agencies, entrepreneurs, research foundations, other universities, cities, countries, many kinds of entities across the world are beginning to speak SDG. Next slide. And so are we. We are just beginning to speak SDGs in public. And we started in a term of 2020 by asking IQP students to identify which SDGs their projects relate to. This is just a little clip from the guidance that we give students that links them to the goals. Next, please. And I'm going to tell you how it works, and then I'm going to show you by trying to zip through a few screenshots and before wrapping up. So in eProjects, which is thanks to our incredible IT team, Andy Whalen in particular, in eProjects, as students submit their IQPs, they're asked to identify one or more SDGs that their project addresses. They can choose a does not apply option. There are certainly cases where that may be true. Probably many more cases where they can be applied though. Students submitting MQPs can also choose SDG tags, but that's optional at this point. Next, please. In Digital WPI, which is the archive of student projects, IQPs associated with SDGs can be found by choosing an SDG as a facet, and that's what I'm going to show you in a second. Next slide, please. So if you go to Digital WPI, and if you start at the main page and then just put your cursor in that search box there and hit enter, you'll come to a page that looks like this, where all of the collections that are in Digital WPI will show up there on the left-hand side. You can see what the collections are and how many items are in them. And so what you want to do then is choose interactive qualifying projects. You'll click on that. Next slide, please. And when you do that, you'll see that you're now filtering. You can see that little kind of thing that looks like a search box. It's just a little form underneath the search box that says that you're filtering now to IQPs. And then what you can do is scroll down. Next slide, please. And in the, as you can see, the other facets that are offered now include the UN SDGs. And what you'll do is you'll click on that little bracket there. Next slide, please. And what that does is it opens up the first few of the SDGs that show up. And as you can see, they show up in sort of a numerical order from the most to the least projects in each of those areas. But you'll probably want to see the whole list of SDGs, at least to begin with. So click on the more. Next slide, please. And then you'll see them all. And again, they're in the order in which, as you can see, from the most projects to the least projects. These are still a pretty small number since we're just working with the last term or so. If you want to see them in a more maybe intuitive way by, like by SDG number, you can get kind of close if you click on the A to Z sort, which is, I know, not intuitive, but next, please. And now you can see number 1, followed by 10 through 17, followed by 2 through 9, which is kind of understandable in a certain way. We're going to try to get that fixed so that you will be able to actually sort by the UN SDG number. Next, please. So once you choose one of those SDGs, in this case, we've chosen number 12, as you can see at the top there, you'll see the list of projects that are associated with that SDG. And what we'll do next is choose that top one, next. And this is just the full record for this document. This is where you can view the document. And you can also see the 4 different SDGs with which the students have associated their project. And at this point, if you click on one of these links, you will kind of explode back out to all of the resources that are linked to that SDG. So we won't do that, but we'll just go on to the next slide, please. And I'll just say a few words about how it's going. And I think, we can, at this point, a few months into the project, we can say the good is that we're beginning to raise awareness of the SDGs. And we believe that they are more meaningful to the external world than, for example, our WPI divisions for the IQPs, which used to be the way we sort of put IQPs into big buckets. We also hope that this is kind of a step towards seeing new connections, perhaps areas of strength. And we often get asked this question of, what kind of sustainability work do our students do in the IQPs or in their other projects? And rather than saying, well, we've got 300 projects that relate to sustainability, this provides a little more nuance, a little bit more information about where our strengths are, where our students' interests are, perhaps, too. Next, please. What needs work? I think awareness. Next, please. So awareness in the sense that we want to make sure that you understand as faculty what's going on here, and that our students understand what's going on here. We think it's a pretty easy lift, but it may be a new lift for a lot of people. And I think Paul Matheson is here today too, attending, and we're working with Paul and with Christelle in the Diversity and Inclusion office to put together a program on Earth Day. So please watch out for it. It will be a little bit deeper dive into the SDGs at WPI, both through the eyes of faculty and students, and we'll look a little bit further at again what the significance of this new language is. Next, please. So what's next? Just a few possibilities, and certainly this is just opening up a conversation, which I hope will be across the whole campus among our students and our faculty. Next. So one of the things that we can begin to do is to explore WPI faculty research through this lens, through this language. Scopus and other databases now allow us to kind of see what's in the bucket of a particular SDG in the way of faculty research, which is, I think our mileage may vary, but it's an interesting thing to get more familiar with. Next, please. We know that students, in fact, I think this year, a even larger percentage of students, nearly 70% of students looking for a college are looking for the commitment of that college to sustainability. It may not be the decisive factor for them, but they're looking. And I think that this direction allows us to begin to market WPI's ability to respond to students' interest in a variety of sustainable development activities and goals. Next, please. I hope you can come to our Earth Day event, because you'll find out more about a student project that would support helping students find courses by SDG. So again, there's that sort of common language. Really exciting May 2020 IQP that studied both what kind of courses we now offer, but also what courses students are interested in by SDG. Next, please. And there are many, many other possibilities. And we're just kind of opening that door and hoping to develop the conversation around it. Next, please. And next, thank you. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dean Terry Kamasano, who's going to talk about graduate students and adaptation in this new world.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anna. I really enjoyed that presentation. I'm actually really enjoying all of them today. So I wanted to just say a few words about the adaptability of our graduate students that we've seen this year and this term especially. Next slide, please. So you probably know that the biggest event, one of the biggest events we do every year for graduate students is we celebrate all of the research that our master's and PhD students are engaged in at WPI. And this year, of course, we had to turn the event to virtual. But I'm happy to say that it was a great success, and Rachel had a lot to do with that success. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you to Rory Flynn. These are just some examples of some of the presentations that were advanced to the finals. So we were not sure what the turnout would be like. When we used to do this in the campus center, I think we had 165 students last year. This year for our virtual event, we had 177 students, so that was super exciting. We had 137 judges, so I know many of you are on the line right now, so thank you to all of the judges who spent the time listening to the presentations and giving feedback to the students. And 61 community members at WPI, so they weren't judges, they weren't even required to view these presentations, but thank you to those of you who viewed the presentations and gave feedback to our students. This is just a few examples of some of the finalists moving on from learning science, BCB, mechanical engineering, and IGMD. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we did select finalists from this first round, and there will be 63 graduate students going on to the finals. If you can make it for even part of the day on April 6th, we'll be having the finals presented live. So each of these students will do a very short live presentation, and it is broken out by category. So if you can't free up the whole day, you can see which category you're interested in and what fits your schedule. And you'll get a lot more emails and advertising about that, but we hope that many of you will be able to make it for that event. I know that we noticed that one of the biggest advantages this year was by allowing the presentations to be viewed online over a full week period, it was much easier on the judges. We know how busy everyone is, and sometimes it's hard to give up a whole day to come for an event. So this time our judges could kind of spread out their work, and it was a lot less stressful for the judges. And again, we really, really appreciate the time that many judges put in giving feedback to these students. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit of the other programming we've been doing this term. Rory hosted a thesis and dissertation writing bootcamp. We actually do this event every C-term. Our graduate students are still really forging ahead on their research. And so of course, they're still writing their theses, having thesis defenses scheduled over Zoom. We were really excited that we had 31 students attend the boot camp, and it's getting to be the time of year, definitely next month, you're going to see announcements for thesis defense scheduled practically every day in April. So it's getting to be a really exciting time. Next slide, please. We have also continued a lot of our the other programming that we do for graduate students, including the Graduate Health and Wellness series. We know that this year it truly has been a struggle for many people to be, mostly working from home. Most of the classes are online for the graduate students. So we know that people are sometimes feeling isolated, definitely feeling stressed. And so we have some programming that helps people try to manage and deal with these different issues. And we had 26 students attend that session. We also have, you might be familiar with our regular STARS program. And one of the highlights in that program is the networking. And we had 38 students attend the networking. And then this is one that honestly surprised me a little bit. Our responsible conduct of research course that Rory Flynn teaches is actually not a simple 1 hour workshop. This is a 13-hour commitment. And so we weren't sure, would we have enough students who were still interested and could commit the time to this? And I should add, they don't get credit for this. So they're doing it just because they know it benefits them in their research and in their future career. And we were really excited that we had 25 graduate students from 14 different graduate programs who were able to complete this course. Next slide, please. Oh, and next, it is my pleasure to introduce Tanya Domingo, Professor and Secretary of the Faculty.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone. It's early in D term. We are reflecting on C term, and I was asked to reflect in particular, I guess, on faculty governance. And I think this title is quite appropriate. It's we have heard through not only this presentation, but presentations throughout a year, a number of things that faculty do at WPI, and today is no different. You have heard great success stories from undergraduate to graduate teaching from our colleagues. You have hopefully watched faculty governance work through faculty meetings with adoption of new programs, new departments, new coursework. And of course, doing what faculty governance has to do every year. It's take care of its own house, making sure our colleagues are reviewed for tenure and promotion. One of the most important functions that the faculty is engaged in. I would really like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you who has, through the past 12 months, this is the anniversary, just about from when we started last year, meeting from remote spaces. I would like to thank you all for being able to navigate in the best of ways possible your family relationships, your personal circumstances, your hopefully not too many health concerns, and remain just as big of a part of this community as we are in the best of times. And if I may say so, I think maybe this experience too has brought us closer together, taught us that depending on each other is important, telling us that just about what we thought was impossible, it is possible. And I hope that collectively we have really done WPI proud with the way we have managed the past 12 months. And of course, the most important component, faculty or faculty governance both, is paying attention. And I know Terry will share the sentiment with me as Dean of Graduate Studies. Students have gone through very, very difficult times, not unlike times that we have faced, but even maybe more so challenging for many of them. And we have tried to reach them on every level of their discomfort and challenges that they faced as friends, as advisors, and as teachers. And I hope that as soon as this academic year comes to an end, we can celebrate everything we have done in the way we have done it that defines who we are, the faculty of WPI in person. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tanya, for those great words. And thanks to all of you that have really made this event a truly special one. Before we take questions, I was wondering if we could maybe have a few words from Kimberly Le Chasseur, who I think is here, about the individual perspectives that she has had in working with Sarah Wooden Schwartz. Kimberly, are you there?
Let me unmute myself. Yes, so we are going to be posting the link to the YouTube version of the video that cut out on the Morgan Center site. In part because working with Sarah is such a great example of sort of the happenstance that we find ourselves in with the pandemic. She was collecting data and doing wonderful things before the pandemic and wasn't sure whether it was asking too much. And I think that that's a sentiment that a lot of faculty were in the position of having to figure out. Is it asking too much to expect our students to do PBL across so many different circumstances this year that were particularly stressful? And what we were able to find was that it actually was more beneficial than we had anticipated. And I think that that's not the only way to make the decision about what to do in your classes, but it is an example of why we do scholarship of teaching and learning. And if we treat our teaching the way that we treat research and have sort of hypotheses and systematic documentation and test our intuition, it can provide some really useful information. And I think that that's what I'm here to help do. I think you started to see some of the tone of the wonderful relationship that Sarah and I have had over multiple projects. So I'm not scary. Come and find me, send me an email. I'm happy to explore similar questions that you might have in your classes.
Thank
Is
you,
that
Kimberly.
what you were looking for, Wally?
Yes, that was just perfect. Thanks. I really appreciate this and the great work that you're doing on many fronts. And if it's okay, I'd like to also call on Valerie Rifkin-Smedel, who I know has been working with John Sullivan and Kan Sabunku. Kan or John, if you're also here, please also chip in on the second video.
Sure, I'm here. Maybe I can tell a few sentences about our work. I'm sorry the video didn't work. We were working on it for quite some time, but I think it will be available somehow to you all. I want to say a few words and explain what we did, but I want to start with some technicality of the laboratory and experimentation education. So it is important, it's for sure for engineering. But the way we do right now conventionally is that students are on campus and they use high-end equipment to do experiments. And we wanted to change that such that students, we provide mobility to students such that students can be at home, do experiments, and we want to decrease the costs as well so that they can do meaningful experiments with much less cost of the instrumentation. And actually they use things like this. So this is an Arduino maker board. So it can connect to Wi-Fi. It can get 12-bit data acquisition and things like this. So this is a load cell. It can measure the deflection on this beam. And with this, you can make a weight scale, for example. And actually, this is one of the projects that students do as a part of our class. They make a custom built weight scale at home. And we feel that it really excites the students as well. And I also would like to thank Kimberly, Valerie, and Caitlin. They helped us a lot, to design this. And probably Valerie can say a few words as well.
That's great. Thanks, Kan. Valerie, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, so from an instructional design perspective, the project that we worked on together, John and John, was really great because it was a wonderful opportunity to figure out how to do a lab-based course online. So this was actually a pre-COVID experience for us. We were trying to figure out the best way to really get at what would make a more positive learning experience for the students. How can we get them to do this kind of really intensive lab-based work with the tools and things that they might have available at their homes. But we also really were very intentional in how we created the content for the course. We really wanted to look at combinations of video, text-based content, discussion forums, things like that to really get some interaction between the students in the course. So overall, it was a really wonderful experience. And it sounds like John and John shared that the students were really positive about the course, that they really enjoyed it, and that they were able to really get a lot out of it, which was really exciting.
Great, thanks, Valerie.
Thank you.
No, I can't see the question and answers. Rachel, do we have any questions and answers?
We do have,
sorry.
Yes, we do have one for Professor Samasi. It says, as an instructional designer at WPI, I often suggest using video feedback when possible for all the reasons you mentioned. I'm glad to hear the students responded positively to your feedback videos. One thing we often hear is that video feedback might be more time consuming for faculty than simply putting out feedback. Did you find that the video feedback was overwhelming or overly time intensive? Do you have any tips to make the process smoother for faculty who want to adopt video feedback?
Yeah, that's I guess that's a great question. And from my personal experience, I found that the way I did it, at least this time, was to start by providing the feedback that I would normally provide to my students. But instead of just sending the text to them, once I write the text, I decided to record it as a video and then send the video to the student instead. So definitely at the beginning, it might take a little bit of time to get used to providing video feedback and systematically recording videos. But as the time goes by and you get comfortable, it's actually saving time, because instead of typing directly your feedback, you can possibly just record the video right away, and it's good practice to actually record the critical feedback, the high level feedback, and then keep the video to 3 minutes, if possible, 3 to 5 minutes maximum, because we don't also want to overburden the student to watch a longer video. So 2-3 minutes is the ideal, and you can still add the other feedback on the text or like you will normally do. But taking that extra time to type your feedback, your overall feedback, instead of recording it, there's the trade-off there. And I realized that recording it directly actually is faster than and there's some study that actually shows that video feedback tend to save time in terms of the recording, but with the added benefit that the student tend to prefer that 60-70% of students report liking it, and build rapport with the student. I think that's usually a good trade-off to have. So it's not overwhelming. Maybe the first 2 or 3 videos that I recorded, but by the 4th and 5th, I was more comfortable recording directly.
So with that, I want to thank Rachel, by the way, our master coordinator, for bringing us together, and IT for really helping us in so many ways, and helping us to recover, for example, from the sound loss we had. I want to thank all our speakers and our participants. I'm always amazed, I meet people in different ways, and then I find out all the intriguing different things that everybody's doing. And I think today we found out just a little bit about what's going on at WPI. And I really want to express my appreciation to all of you for innovating in such positive ways during this era of COVID. Thanks for the innovation. I also want to thank especially folks that help our students in grad studies as well as undergrad studies. We saw a glimpse today of some of the work being done by Rory and Terry in grad studies and how they're making graduate programs exciting to the students in spite of the challenges that our students are facing. And you also saw the need for focus on student wellness and health and well-being, which is more important today than has ever been at any time in our history. So I urge all of you, as you interact with our students, please do so with compassion and do so recognizing that they are going through different kinds of challenges. And to the extent that we can, let's try to accommodate them and think of ways that they can keep learning. I was quite nostalgic, by the way, when I saw some of the things being done by Kansa Bunchu and Valerie et al. On how you learn through experiments. For somebody like myself, this is how I kind of understand things until I can touch them and feel them and play with them. It's kind of difficult for me to understand. And then once I understand, then I remember it for life and I understand it for life. So I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate the work that Sarah's doing and to make statics real. Right, as opposed to some abstract concept. But I truly appreciate all the work that we are doing academically to make this a rich community. Before I close, though, I want to thank those that have made it possible for us to be here so far. I'm always amazed when I see what the CERT folks are doing to take care of this pandemic in our own environment. We take it for granted, but we're in a bubble within a bubble. And so that's why we feel safe. But there are many people that work really hard to keep us safe. So I want to thank the work of CERT. I want to thank our president that coordinates that team and people like Philip Clay, and then Rita Rao and Chris Billia who represent us in this group for the work that they've done to keep us safe. I'm especially grateful to faculty governance for working so hard. And I enjoyed Tanya's description of saying that it's not what we say, but it's what we do. And I can assure you that Tanya and the faculty governance team have done a lot to bring us this far. And I really want to acknowledge the role that they have played in so many ways in caring about tenure and promotion, in caring about well-being, in making sure we pass the motions to make things happen, create new courses, and all the things that make us really a great academic institution. So with that, I just want to encourage all of you in D-term, keep our focus on our students. For me, that's where I draw a lot of my energy, and I know the same is true for most of you. And in a strange way, they draw their energy from us. And as we work together with them, I really urge you all to keep that focus for our staff, for our faculty, for all of us and our students. And I look forward in a few weeks to celebrating the end of D-term in the near future. So thanks very much, everyone, and please stay safe. Take care. Bye.